So, yep, okay. Hobsbawm Jazz is the title of his talk. And let's begin at the beginning with a New Orleans marching band. Jazz has been able to draw upon a wider reservoir of potential artists than any other art in our century, wrote the Marxist historian and jazz critic Eric Hobsbawm in 1958, because the jazz musician was nearer to the ordinary, randomly chosen citizen than most other artists. It's on page 227 of his book, The Jazz Scene. He goes on in extreme cases, such as New Orleans, jazz has been able to draw upon virtually the whole of the population. First up, then, is Maryland, My Maryland by the Eureka Brass Band. You'll notice how about a third of the way in, the tune switches to that of a famous socialist anthem. It seems very appropriate for a discussion about Hobsbawm jazz. Okay. Now, Eric Hobsbawm, our subject, was born in Alexandria and raised in Vienna and Berlin. He left Germany in 1933 to flee the Nazis with an uncle and aunt. Both parents were dead. They settled in London, as was Eric's right. His father was British, and so he had British citizenship. At 16, he had more agency than Marty Gross, who was 3 when he left Germany in the same year, 1933. You only had 2 choices with Nazis: flee or resist. Flight was the better part of valor for Marty's father, George Gross, a target because of his mocking, satirical, anti-Nazi art. They settled in Chicago, and Marty turned into a Carl Kress-style guitarist with a nice line in witty monologues. His version of Just a Gigolo is prefaced by a remarkable rap that is a history lesson in itself. So here is Marty Gross and Just a Gigolo.
This song was published in 1930, music by a man named Kasuli and words by a man named Bremer. And it concerns itself with the fate of a former officer of the Austro-Hungarian army. And any of you who have paid just a iota, a scintilla of attention in history class would know that that last statement is a tautology. For by 1930, every officer of the Austro-Hungarian army was an ex-officer, because there was no more Austro-Hungary, because they got the short end of the stick at the end of WWI. This song tells the story of a bold, dashing officer of the Hussars who fell upon hard times. Once he was a sight to behold in his uniform. He wore a fur shako on his head with a plume and a red piece of cloth, sort of a red tongue coming out of the side. His tunic was jet black with gold facing. Over his shoulder, he wore a pelisse, P-E-L-I-S-S-E, secured at the throat by a gold catch. That's a short fur jacket, and it was often worn that way. They didn't actually put their arms in the sleeves. It gave them a more dashing look. His sky blue trousers with the ormolu stripe down the side were tucked into cordovan leather boots shined to a high luster. The boots terminated in gold-plated spurs, which jingled seductively as he strode the corridors of power in Vienna. Then, in his heyday, we could often find our officer mounted on his dappled steed, with his saber drawn, glinting in the sun, as he escorted the Emperor Franz Joseph's gilded coach on state affairs. Or we could find him on the weekends pig-sticking in the Vienna woods for recreation. Then again, we might find him at 4 o'clock in the morning, sipping Veuve Clicquot from a demoiselle's slipper, having waltzed the night away to Strauss melodies. But that was then, and now is now. Now, when the song was written, our officer lives in straitened circumstances. He lives in one of the less prepossessing rings of Vienna, for as you probably know, Vienna is divided into rings, much as Paris is divided into arrondissements. Our officer lives in a 4th floor walk-up, in a one-room room. For sleeping accommodations, he has a bed that folds in and out of the wall, which we call a Murphy bed. And each night, he of course has to prepare himself to go to work at the only job that he could find, because naturally there weren't very many jobs left for former officers of the cavalry, especially of the Hussars, after the end of the hostilities. So we see him each evening as he stands in front of the mirror and checks himself out. First, he looks, of course, he's dressed in what they call smoking. Das Smoking in Vienna, in the German language, which is their name for we call it a tuxedo, the English call it a dinner jacket. And his has seen some wear, but where he works, it's not really important because it's usually rather dark. You can't see the sort of shabbiness of the material. And as he stands in front of the mirror, he first checks out his pomaded widow's peak, and then he twirls the end of his mustaches, plural, because if you have only one mustache, it tends to impair your sense of balance. Then he checks his bow tie. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then his hand runs down to the facing, the collar of his smoking. He checks out the flower in there that he stole from a neighbor's window box, a nelke, as it's called. We call it a carnation. And then his hands run down and he checks the crease in his trousers. His trousers were pressed between two damp towels under the mattress of his bed overnight. And then with his toes, he gingerly explores his patent leather pumps. Is that blotting paper going to hold for another night? Yeah, it feels pretty good. Yeah, I guess it'll hold. And last but not least, he inserts a monocle into the socket of his eye and prepares to go to work at a Tanzlokal, where he must sell his talents to the highest bidder. And that's what this song is all about. I will introduce it with a sort of a Weimar Republic introduction, well aware that the Weimar Republic was 400 or 500 kilometers to the north in Germany, but its spirit of artistic, what shall we say, a modernity combined with disillusionment seeped throughout Middle Europa at this time. So it's not inappropriate to borrow from the mood of the Weimar Republic. And here's the introduction now. Schöner Gigolo, armer Gigolo, denke nicht mehr an die Zeiten, wo du als Husar, Gold verschnürt sogar, konntest durch die Straßen reiten. Uniform passé, Liebchen sagt Adieu, schöne Welt, du gingst in Franzen. Wenn das Herz dir auch bricht, zeig ein lachendes Gesicht, man zahlt und du musst tanzen. Just a gigolo, every place I go, the people know the part I'm playing. Pay for every dance, selling each romance, every night some heart betraying. There will come a day, youth will pass away, what will they say about me when the end comes, I know they'll say I'm just a gigolo as life goes on without me. Wenn das Herz dir auch bricht, zeig ein lachendes Gesicht. Man zahlt und du musst tanzen.
Unlike many, Hobsbawm chose not to leave the Communist Party after the forceful suppression of a Hungarian revolution by the Soviet Union in 1956. Sue Lawley made much of this when Professor Hobsbawm was invited onto Desert Island Discs in 1995. Hobsbawm explained that he had stayed to push for change from within the party. He was unswervingly loyal to a second party, the Jazz Party. A lifelong jazz fan, Hobsbawm approached the New Statesman magazine and offered himself as their jazz critic. He was then a lecturer in history at Birkbeck College, London. He argued that other magazines had jazz columns, and one of them was written by Kingsley Amis, who didn't know a thing about jazz. He carried the day and adopted the pen name Francis Newton in homage to Frankie Newton, the trumpeter, probably best remembered for his association with Billie Holiday. Newton turned up in a duet with Art Tatum on a record of Tatum live recordings called God is in the House. You have to be good to duet with God. The jazz scene, written in 1958, is a Marxist take on jazz, I would say. It explores jazz economics and is interested in the working conditions of jazz musicians. The same rigor Hobsbawm brought to disinterring the economics of the Industrial Revolution in the age of extremes is applied to jazz economics in the jazz scene. My interest was piqued. How does his critique differ from standard jazz criticism? Do left-wing jazz lovers listen to music differently to right-wing jazz lovers? These are interesting questions. Here is a typical extract from a chapter, Jazz as Protest. Jazz was originally music designed to be enjoyed by the least intellectual or expert, the least privileged, educated, or experienced citizen, as well as by others. It was designed to be played by men who have picked it up anyway. More than this, jazz is a musical manifesto of populism, loud, raucous, sounding like nothing on earth except an undisciplined brass band playing in a room too small for it. The pioneer jazz band nailed the colors of its vulgarity firmly to the mast. It appealed not simply because people liked the sound, but because it was a conquest of popular over minority culture, like that of the Marx Brothers, who break up a performance of grand opera by getting the band to play Take Me Out to the Ball Game. A pioneer jazz band playing in a room too small for it. Does the description fit this early example of New Orleans jazz, Short Dress Gal by Sam Morgan's jazz band?
heart wasn't full. She's swapping for bull. All I could hear the voice was saying, won't you love it, babe? Everybody looking, love it, babe. All boys see, won't you love it, babe? Everybody looking, cause shine drag no more style.
Here's another extract. It has come closer, nearer to breaking down class lines than any other art. At least I know of no other which could produce a table full of sax players from a West Indian orphanage, American soldiers from a colored neighborhood in Cleveland, journalists, dons, salesmen, and souteniers, whatever souteniers are, single-mindedly debating the stylistic difference between the East and West Coast schools of jazz. The music stakes a claim to a serious participation in the arts for people who would, but for it, be mostly debarred from such participation, and its appeal for such people is therefore strong. The West Indian orphanage must be the alpha school for boys, which nurtured the Scartelites, Desmond Decker, and others. This would normally be my cue to play some ska, but I'd rather stick with Hobsbawm jazz, my brief. East versus West Coast jazz, I wonder if Henry Red Allen counts as East Coast. This is Roaming by Henry Red Allen.
Back to
face and grace, the place that I love the best. Oh, back where the reeds are blowing, where draggy waters flow, back where the moist land growing, that's where I long to go, yo, yo, yo. Morning, morning, lazy waters running, that's why I'm running home.
Hobsbawm nails the appeal for the middle classes on page 265. The milieu of gangsters, pimps, and prostitutes was simply more heroic, free, innocent, and in its roundabout way, just because it was one of outcasts and protesters against social convention. In terms of jazz, jazz is good music because it is believed to derive not simply from Negroes, but from the red light district of New Orleans. So let's go for some more gut bucket New Orleans. The following is the original New Orleans Rhythm Kings playing She's Crying for Me. still on chapter 14, Jazz as Protest. Hobsbawm identifies the black bias of older white listeners and states that Mesro's book, Really the Blues, is the best literary expression of a desire to become a white Negro, and that this is an inverted form of racism. He is another Hobsbawm humdinger. The fact that the one attitude leads to civilized behavior between peoples and the other to Nazi or South African barbarism should not obscure the equal irrationality of both. A good deal of jazz criticism is permeated by less extreme versions of the same pro-colored race feeling, and this sometimes affects critical standards. Revolutionary Blues by Mesro might be the natural choice for my next selection, given the context. The lady leaves her castle with the raggle-taggle gypsies, writes Hobsbawm, drawing from a folk song, not because they play so sweet, but because they are not ladies and gentlemen. They are, in fact, gypsies. This can only be a cue for the incomparable Maxine Sullivan's Raggle-Taggle Gypsies, backed by John Kirby and his orchestra from 1940.
There were 3 gypsies a-come to my door, and down downstairs ran this lady, oh. One sang high and another sang low, and the other sang Bonnie, Bonnie Biscuit, oh. Then I pulled off my silk finished gown and put on hose of leather, oh. The ragged, ragged rags about our door, I'm a-gone with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh. It was late last night when my Lord came home, inquiring for his lady, oh. The servant said on every hand, she's a-gone with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh. He rode high and he rode low. He rode through wood and copses too, until he came to a wide open field, and there he espied his lady, oh. What makes me leave my house and land? What makes me leave my money, oh? What makes me leave my new wedded lord to follow the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh? Oh, what care I for my house and lord? What care I for my money, oh? What care I for my new wedded lord? I'm off with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh. Oh, what care I for a goose-feathered bed with a sheet turned down so bravely, oh. For tonight I sleep in a wide open field, along with the raggle-taggle gypsies, oh. Along with the raggle-taggle gypsies.
Trust Hobsbawm to draw a connection between folk and jazz, two of my musical loves, and explain why both are needed. Jazz and folk, Hobsbawm writes, are largely distinct from the apparatus of show business. Now that I think on, my favorite rock music is similarly distinct from the apparatus of show business. I'm always interested when music of folk origin turns up in the Afro-American tradition. The exemplar is perhaps 6 Nights Drunk, which has appeared in music of Afro-American culture in Wake Up Baby by Sonny Boy Williamson, a blues tune, Jody by Mickey Murray, a soul tune, and I'm pleased to say I have a new version, Whose Hat Is That by Jimmy Witherspoon. They all derive from 6 Nights Drunk.
Woman, you'd better tell me. You better tell me whose hat is that. You'd better tell me. You better tell me whose hat is that laying there on that bed. You'd better tell me, woman, before I grab this baseball bat. Now, little Junior said there was a man here last night. He said when you came in, you turned out all of the lights. So, woman, tell me, you better tell me whose hat is that. You'd better tell me, woman, before I get this baseball bat. You said it was my hat. Woman, why do you lie like that? You know I wear a 750 process and don't wear nobody's hat. So, woman, you'd better tell me. You better tell me whose hat is that. You'd better tell me, woman, 'cause I'm standing here with this baseball bat. You said it was your uncle's hat. You know your uncle's dead. It's a 6 7/8, and it won't even fit his head. Woman, tell me. I said, woman, you better tell me whose hat is that. You'd better tell me, woman, before I grab this baseball bat.
Let's pick up Hobsbawm on page 268. Unembattled, happy, almost complacent is not a bad description of old-style New Orleans jazz. This did not last, but its influence on white pop music, serious jazz, and the jazz public cannot be described as one of social protest. Only in the fervour of the spirituals and in the heartbreaking but unself-pitying blues did a note of genuine protest sound. But the vogue for these did not make substantial progress until the socially conscious 1930s. Let's find an example of unembattled, happy, almost complacent jazz and an example of a fervent spiritual or unself-pitying blues. If I go for Blind Willie Johnson, I get a fervent spiritual and unself-pitying blues rolled into one. And I might get through the first half without too much overrun. Tap Room Special by Albert Nicholas defines unembattled jazz. It's followed by Motherless Child by Blind Willie Johnson.
And mother, the children have a hard time. Mother, the children have a hard time. Mother dead. The Lord have anywhere to go. Wandering around from door to door. Have a hard time. Nobody on earth can take a mother's place when mother is dead, Lord. Nobody on earth take mother's place when mother dead. Nobody on earth take mother's place. Men who are starting fade away. Nobody treats you like mother will. Your wife, your husband may be good to you when mother is dead, Lord. May be good to you, mother dear. Wife, your husband may be good to you, but there ain't nothing else prove untrue. Nobody treats you like mother will when mother is dead, Lord. Lord, Lord, Lord. Well. Well, some people say that sister will do when mother is dead. That sister will do when mother dead. Some people say that sister will do, but soon as she marries, she'll turn her back on you. Nobody treats you like mother will. And father will do the best he can when mother is dead, Lord. Well, the best he can when mother dead. I'll do the best he can. So many things the father can't understand. Nobody treats you like mother will. Hey, mother, the children have a hard time when mother is dead, Lord. Mother, the children have a hard time, mother dead. They'll not have anywhere to go, wandering around from door to door. Have a hard time.
And that's it for the first half. Marxism is an economic philosophy, first of all, and Hobsbawm is as attentive to jazz economics. Oh, have I said this? I think I have. I'll just alert you instead to this figure 1. This comes from a footnote in the book, and it's a diagram that details the cost of making a long playing disc at 1958 prices. So you'll see that it's all there, and that the break-even point is 1,200 sales. And there's a picture in the book too. I'll sum that up. Now, this is a picture, I think, of Dobell's record shop in 1958. It's captioned "In the record shop." Sonny Rollins' Way Out West is prominent. To Swing or Not to Swing by Barney Kessel is here. So let's play something from Barney Kessel. to revisit the age, and I'll see if I can leave a diagram up so we can study those figures at our leisure. First, I got to find my playlist. Here we go. Right, I should tell you that along with Barney Kessel on guitar, of course, that was Harry Edison trumpet, George Auld on tenor sax, Jimmy Rowell's piano, Fred Mitchell bass, and Irv Copler on drums. Right. Let's get the picture up again if we can. To the right of the man in profile is an EP of Paul Robeson here. I have the original artwork of this EP in my exhibition Sounding the Century at Manchester Central Library. It's playing now, and you can and I'll be there meeting my public most days. So bear that in mind. It's my plug for the day. And to the left of the gentleman, partly obscured by, is this other Bill Leader LP, Mountain Songs and Banjo Tunes by Guy Carawan, both on Topic label. Bill Leader was involved in the production of both, or in the production of Paul Robeson and the recording of Guy Carawan. So, in short, I had the ear of somebody who was making records at the time Hobsbawm was writing about, and I ran the figures in our diagram past him for comment. Before Bill's response, let's have some more music. Here is some music of the period, Scales by the Sandy Brown's Jazz Band from the 1957 Pi LP, McJazz. It finds Sandy Brown, the Scottish clarinetist and composer, acoustic engineer, and all-round character, playing mainstream jazz with his old college buddy, Al Fairweather, on trumpet. Okay, let's summon up that diagram again. This is what Bill told me when I placed the figures before him. We couldn't have done it at those sorts of costs. God forgive us. We didn't pay MU rates because we were dealing with individual artists who had just paid a royalty on sales. If you didn't sell anything, you didn't pay them anything. We didn't have studio costs. Well, not normal studio costs. They went down to a minimum. Topic didn't pay studio costs because they rigged a small studio on the top floor of the Workers' Music Association, the parent company. Also, Bill did lots of recordings in the field. The major expense, apparently, was the cost of the sleeves. Topic devised ingenious methods to keep the cost down, like they tended to rely on the kindness of well-wishers. One of these was a Punch and Judy man, John Alexander, who would turn out silkscreen covers in his garden shed. They ordered lots of uniform sleeves of striped design and pasted on strips of paper with the details of individual LPs. It was a shoestring operation, and today Topic is the oldest independent record company in the land, so they survived. In settling on 2,000 sales as average, Hobsbawm tacitly admitted that many LPs were made for much less, commenting, some LPs can still be made very cheaply. For Topic, a sales figure of 2,000 was fantastical. It was more realistic to settle for 99, which was the amount you could press before the inland revenue hit you with tax. Now then, if Hobsbawm mentioned anything about Third Stream, the mid-century vogue for classical jazz crossover, I haven't got to it yet. But here are the modern jazz quartet getting into some Bach counterpoint with guest artist Lorindo Almeida on British television in 1964. I'll let Steve Race introduce Fugue in A minor. Here we are.
Has it ever occurred to you to wonder how Johann Sebastian Bach would have enjoyed jazz? Certainly jazz has enjoyed Johann Sebastian Bach. Musicians love playing those moving, logical lines of his preludes and fugues and contrapuntal works and so on. Bach in his time wrote not just 48 preludes and fugues, but lots of them, probably hundreds. And the Modern Jazz Quartet and Lorindo Almeida are going to play one of them now. It's just called, for our purposes, Fugue in A minor, and the first statement is by Milt Jackson.
Mr. Milt Jackson must play in the style of the modern jazz quartet when with that group, even though he may not always want to, wrote Hobsbawm. Milt Jackson's restlessness, in fact, was the reason given for the first MJQ breakup in 1974. When he was given his head, What's New was Milt Jackson's choice in jazz, and Lucky Thompson, Hank Jones, Kenny Clarke, and Wendell Marshall was his choice of lineup. This is What's New. What's New? There's a cue for Kenny Clarke on page 179. In America, a single fashionable drummer, Mr. Kenny Clarke, could appear in a single year in 190 tracks made with upwards of 30 different groups or at different sessions. Kenny Clarke is an example of a prosperous studio musician. Lucky Thompson, on the other hand, could be the jazz player whose end Hobsbawm foretells in the following passage. The heart-rending stories of first-class musicians discovered starving on park benches have normally reflected not so much objective economic conditions, the lack of foresight of the musicians themselves, or their stubbornness in refusing to play any but their own type of music. Elsewhere, he ruthlessly anatomizes the cutthroat nature of the scene where Kenny Clarke will rise and the Lucky Thompson will fall. Jazz and pop music in general is one of the last frontiers of private enterprise. So long as the cost of production of a hit tune or song on which the industry rests remains as low as it does, the jungle will continue to flourish in it, as they do the rather similar garment trade, enjoying the kill as much and perhaps more than the actual meal. One tune suggests itself. This is Duke Ellington, Charles Mingus, and Max Roach. Money Jungle. Eric Hobsbawm had his phone tapped, his friends were monitored, and he was generally kept a close watch on. And naturally, an MI5 agent went around to attend his record recitals. The MI5 man was diligent in his work and might have picked up a thing or two about jazz in his mission. Hobsbawm's MI5 files were made public in 2014. The relevant entry reads, I was present on 24th of May 1962 at the small Conway Hall, Red Lion Square, WC1, where a meeting entitled Jazz and Society in Britain was held under the auspices of the music group of the Communist Party of Great Britain. Hobsbawm then spoke for approximately 70 minutes. He outlined the beginnings of jazz in the New Orleans district and its increase in popularity both in Britain and the United States of America. Jazz was, he said, mainly the music of the workers, and it had prospered in the hands of left-wingers who were opposed to the commercialism of the music. He interspersed his speech with recordings of jazz in the traditional and modern idioms. Proposing a vote of thanks to Hobsbawm, the chairman said it had been a most interesting talk. The meeting, which commenced at 7:40 p.m. and terminated at 9:35 p.m., was orderly throughout and was attended by an audience of 27 persons. Sounds like the unicorn, doesn't it? MI5 were perhaps right to worry. Jazz and left-wing politics were natural bedfellows, especially in the years of the Aldermaston marches. As Hobsbawm writes, World Youth Festivals, anti-nuclear marches, May Day demonstrations, or other expressions of hostility to the social status quo have rarely lacked their quota of imitation New Orleans jazz players. And the only time I ever saw the great Humphrey Lyttelton in performance was at a fundraising event for the Morning Star at Alexandra Palace in 1980. This marks Humph as a man of the left, whereas Chris Barber shared public stages with Margaret Thatcher to raise funds for the Tory party. I wrestled hard with that one. Does any of this come over in the music? Mr. Humphrey Lyttelton, the quote is on page 192, who has been brave enough to change his band from a traditionalist to a middle period unit, is engaged in interminable polemics with former members of his public who regard this change as treasonable. The furore centered on the presence of Bruce Turner, the famous dirty bopper, who, be it noted, also played with Ewan MacColl and the celebrated Working Man's Band. The following clip demonstrates Turner's versatility and shows how the fears of the reactionaries were completely unfounded, as fears of reactionaries often are. It's untypical in that the front line of the Lyttelton band, Turner, John Barnes and Humph himself, are all tootling clarinets. It is in fact a homage to Sidney Bechet called C'est mes soirs qui parlent. This raises the question of the mismatched musician. Writes Hobsbawm, a passionate bopper in a Dixieland band has problems. A passionate New Orleans man in a modern group, a much more unlikely contingency, must keep most of their enthusiasm to themselves. It strikes me that avant-garde players have greater plasticity. Steve Lacy, for example, started out playing Dixieland. Albert Ayler never strayed too far from the marching band and spiritual. And I remembered a Vic Dickinson LP I have, which is mainstream, so mainstream that it's called mainstream. And that Herbie Nichols is the pianist on the date, trying valiantly to iron out all his modernistic instincts. So this is crazy rhythm from mainstream. And the soloists are Buster Bailey on clarinet, Vic Dickinson on trombone, Joe Thomas on trumpet, Buddy Tate on tenor saxophone, whilst Herbie vamps very energetically in the background. Some observations from the economic philosopher follow. Secondary poverty is built into the world of jazz because it is, like acting and other types of show business, a world of casual labor which encourages free spending and discourages rational economic behavior. It breeds the sort of musician who forgets that £70 a week basic salaries do not last, or who does not care whether they last. We're back to the money jungle. Through this loose, shifting, small-scale, anarchic world, the musician makes his way with the help or burden of a complex network of businessmen whom he carries, agents, managers, publicity men, bookers, and the rest, bookers, and the rest. It's the milieu of sweet smell of success. But let me bring West Side Story in at this point, because Hobsbawm refers to Norman Granz as an avant-garde aficionado of considerable shrewdness and the architect of a sizable business empire built on the dual foundation of a permanent concert roadshow of frontline musicians, jazz at the Philharmonic, and a cast-iron catalogue of recording artists which he traded on highly favourable terms and under his own name and labels to the big companies when they came to need a jazz catalogue. One such hot property was Oscar Peterson, and this is his take on Something's Coming from West Side Story. Ray Brown on bass and Ed Figben on drums. It's produced by Norman Granz, needless to say. I realized coming into the home straight that I promise you insights into the different ways left-wingers and right-wingers listen to jazz. I was being perhaps a bit ambitious, but I can compare passages of Hobsbawm with passages of Philip.
Hey, it's Richard here. In this
Sorry about that. I'll compare passages of Hobsbawm with passages of Philip Larkin, a social conservative whose greatness rests on his poetry and whose daily bread came from librarianship and who was jazz critic of the Daily Telegraph. Here we go. Hobsbawm on progressive jazz. He starts out talking about Lenny Tristano and Lee Konitz and draws conclusions about West Coast jazz in general. Intellectualized and formalized jazz such as this, drained of much of its old-fashioned red blood, naturally appealed particularly strongly to young white players who are much better able to compete with colored ones on territory which is, after all, close to the one in which all white musicians have been brought up. Whereas Philip Larkin, just as negative, laces his put-downs with such waspish humour that you have to smile even as you disagree vehemently on Miles Davis. In the company of Shorter, Hancock et al., Miles is his usual snarling, staccato, disagreeable self, with the exception of the corpse walking circle. He's reviewing Miles Smiles. To me, this is heartless and uninteresting on Albert Ayler. The first Ayler record I heard, Spirits, rather amused me and had a kind of gothic originality. This, Spiritual Unity, seems very run-of-the-mill Shep stuff, though real enthusiasts may see something in it. So we let Lenny Tristano's Turkish Mambo, recorded in 1956, stand in for all the progressive jazz that so intimidated Eric Hobsbawm and Philip Larkin. By contrast, here is Philip Larkin on Louis Armstrong. These groups for Hot 5 and Hot 7 existed only in the studio, but their records are classics, not only for what they are, but as evidence of Armstrong's enormous talent bursting out of its chrysalis. Hobsbawm agrees, but is more inclined to boost Armstrong's credentials as a man of the people. All discussion of the jazz trumpet must begin and end with Louis Armstrong, the greatest jazzman of them all, and in whose art New Orleans music culminates and is surpassed. Louis Armstrong is not just a trumpeter, he is the voice of his people speaking on a horn. West End blues, says Hobsbawm, would probably win in a poll for the best single jazz record ever made. So there you go. Left-wingers and right-wingers listen to jazz in exactly the same way, and if they're from the same generation, reach roughly the same conclusions. There's unanimity, and Louis bridges the gap. Good music transcends ideology, it seems. And I guess I need to close with West End Blues, if it's the single best jazz record ever made. it is pretty good, isn't it? Thanks. That's the end of me.